Hi, I'm Barry from Photographer's Freedom, taking you from beginner to better to business with your DSLR photography, and this video is 7 minutes to better photos with any DSLR camera. Let's go. Step one is steady your camera. If you have a tripod, put that camera on there and use it. Any vibration or movement in your camera while you're taking an exposure is going to produce a less than optimal photo. So if you have a tripod, use it. If you don't have a tripod, put your camera on a rock, a post, your car, the ground, any solid object that's going to hold your camera still while you take a photo. You can also use the strap that came with your camera. Put it around your neck, pull it tight so it pulls into the back of your neck. This creates a stable point of contact that will stop a lot of movement in the camera. Of course, you will have to switch your camera over to live view in order to see what you're taking a photo of, but once you do that, you'll have a stable camera and get a better shot. Step two, choose the right mode. On the top of your camera is this little dial. That is the shooting mode dial. It has all those letters and those little stick figures doing various things. What you want to do is turn that to M. That is manual mode, and I suggest you use that most of the time in order to get better shots. Stay away from the effects modes. No. Night mode, night portrait mode, no. Macro mode, no. Sports mode, no. Just steer away from them. Use manual mode. This allows you to control ISO, aperture and shutter speed independently of each other and get better photos. Step three, choose the right focus mode. Is your subject still, or is it moving? If it's still, you want to use what on Nikon cameras is called AFS, or single servo AF. Hopefully you can see that. You also have the choice on Nikon cameras of AFA, that's auto servo AF. Do not use that. That is where the camera chooses the focus mode and it will ruin your photos most of the time. You want to choose for still subjects AFS. That is where the camera will choose a single point of contrast within the focus square to focus on. Once you half press the shutter button, it will beep and let you know that what you are focusing on is in focus, and you can then take your shot. If your subject is moving, you want to use continuous autofocus or AFC on Nikon cameras. This is where the camera will constantly hunt for focus, and it will focus on whatever is in whatever amount of focus points you choose. So this is great for wildlife or sports photography or anything with moving subjects. You can also use manual focus if you want. The only time I suggest you use manual focus is when you're photographing macro subjects such as flowers or insects or something where you really want to hone in your focus on a specific point of the scene. Don't use manual focus for sports or wildlife. You will not get very good photos most of the time. On some lenses, this one doesn't have it, but there will be an AM switch, which is where you can switch from autofocus to manual focus on your lens. Step four, choose the right aperture. Now this is going to depend on the aperture range of the lens that you are using. With this AFP Nikkor 18 to 55mm lens I have here on the Nikon D3500, this lens goes from f3.5 at its widest point to f36 at its smallest point. I suggest staying away from apertures at either end of the range if you can. They will produce the softest images, so they won't be quite as sharp. Now this depends on your lens. If you're using a more expensive lens, it may be sharp from wide open all the way to closed down, but cheaper lenses like this will not be as sharp, so just remember that. Apertures in the range of f8 to f11 are generally the sharpest with most cheaper lenses, so stick to those if you can, but this is going to depend on what you want your photo to look like. If you want to have a blurry background, you may want to use a wider aperture or a smaller f-stop number. If you're taking a landscape photo, for example, you want big depth of field, everything in focus from front to back, you're going to have to use a smaller aperture or a larger f-stop number. Step five, choose the right shutter speed. Shutter speed is what controls the amount of blur in your images. It freezes motion if you want it to. If your subject is moving, you will need to use a faster shutter speed. So for example, if you're filming your child playing soccer, you might want to use shutter speeds of 1/400th of a second or faster. If you're shooting a fast running dog, you may want to use shutter speeds of 1/1250th of a second or faster. It will depend on how much you want to freeze the motion and how much blur you want in that image. If you have your camera on a tripod and you're filming a still subject, such as a building for example, you can use a slower shutter speed as you like. You will of course have to adjust your aperture and your ISO to compensate to get a good exposure. Whenever you change one setting, you always need to change one of the other two. Your hands are not as steady as you think they are. Any movement in the camera is going to create less than optimal photos. So if you're hand holding, use faster shutter speeds to compensate. Just take some test shots. If you're not shooting wildlife or a sunrise or a sunset that is literally changing or fading before your eyes, you will have time to take some test shots. Take a shot, look at it on your LCD screen, zoom in, see if there are any parts that are blurry. If you don't like those blurry parts, use a faster shutter speed, adjust your other two settings to compensate. Step 6, choose the right ISO. ISO is a gain control. It artificially boosts the amount of light that gets into your camera and it creates noise in doing so. This noise makes your photos less than optimal, so you want to try and avoid using higher ISO numbers if you can. After I have set my aperture and my shutter speed, I will then adjust my ISO to get the exposure that I want. I suggest that if you need to get more light into the camera, that you first widen your aperture or slow your shutter speed, as opposed to raising your ISO, purely because of the noise factor. Raising your ISO will increase the amount of noise in your image, making it less than ideal. So always try and boost the light with aperture or shutter speed first, and remember you'll have to adjust other settings to compensate. Step 7 is edit your photos. I personally like to edit my images in Photoshop or Lightroom because your camera does not take a true to life representation of the image that your eyes see. It doesn't recreate the contrast, the saturation or the sharpness of the image that you see with your eyes. So editing your photos in Lightroom or Photoshop will make them look a lot better. If you don't have these programs, there's a link in the video description where you can check them out. Now, I'm not going to go into the editing process in this video because it's 7 minutes to better DSLR photos, not 7 hours to better DSLR photos, but I am going to make a video specifically aimed at that subject. I will take some photos using these tips and show you how to edit them. So watch for that video coming to a screen near you soon.